Hey guys, it's Jasmine here with Pink and Main. Gonna talk you through this project today using our My Sunshine stamp, our brand new Summer Wreath Decor Dies. We've had a ton of people ask about coordinating stamp sets for these, and unfortunately we're not gonna have any, but I'm gonna walk you through how to make the most out of your dies and actually make them into stamps. And then we're gonna use the Shore paper pad. So these are beautiful textures of the Shore that work perfectly with this sentiment and die set. So let's hop to it. So we're gonna run all of our dies through our die cutting machine. We're gonna use fun foam. This is just cheap kids fun foam you can buy at Michael's. So we're gonna run that through our machine and then adhere them. Gonna adhere our pieces to a stamping block. So I just cut 2 or 3 of each of our dies here and then adhered them so that it filled up as much space as possible. And then on a smaller stamp block, I did 1 of each, and you'll see why that's necessary. As we stamp, we're gonna have some holes that we're gonna fill. So let's go ahead and stamp. So I'm gonna put down a piece of white cardstock just to protect my work surface. I'm gonna use the Distress Oxide in Walnut Stain today. So I'm gonna ink up. And with this being fun foam, you do want, the first time you use it, you are gonna wanna ink up pretty heavily. And it also can be easier to see where you're inking if you lay your stamp down on the surface and bring the ink to it instead of vice versa. Since we can't actually see the stamp through our ink pad or through the block, this is gonna be the best way to go. So with our card here, we're stamping off the edge. So I cut a 4x4 panel, which is the perfect size, you can see, to go on our 4 1/4 by 5.5 A2 card. And I'm just gonna start kind of off the side here, just stamp, and it's gonna be a little tough to stamp potentially. You might want to put some kind of foam pad underneath. In fact, I will go ahead, put a piece of fun foam under, just to give us a little bit of give. The fun foam stamps are not going to be quite as squishy as our regular photopolymer stamps. They're not going to have as much give, so you want to make sure that you put something under your surface if you're afraid that it's not going to stamp quite right. So again, we're bringing our ink pad to our stamp block to make sure that we get full coverage of ink. And I'm trying not to get the same images next to each other. So I'm kind of rotating until I find a spot to my liking. I don't want the glasses next to each other. Let's do Mr. Flamingo here. Okay. And again. Okay, so I've just got one more spot here, and you'll see these little holes right here. We're gonna use this guy to fill him in a minute. So let's try not to do a palm tree. Let's do our sunglasses and anchor here. Okay, so that's as much as we can stamp with these images as they're laid out on our stamp block. So again, I just did 1 on each side here, just to kind of get the most without having to dirty up more than 1 stamp block. I'm gonna place him in here. And if you want, it is 100% okay to do each of your little stamps individually like this. In my opinion, it's faster and just a little bit easier, I guess, to do them all at once. But if you would rather do them this way and do 1 at a time instead of like this, it's the same general process. All right, so that is our stamping done. So I'm gonna set him aside and let him dry for a minute. Because we're using distress inks, they're gonna stay wet a little bit longer. So I'm gonna set him aside and go ahead and do our card base. So I'm gonna use Score Buddy here. Cut standard 8.5 by 5.5 card panel. I'm gonna score at 4 1/4. This is just a standard A2 size card. So I'll go ahead and fold it. And then I'm gonna use the Misty for our sentiment. And you know, ours is a little dirty, sorry about that. I'm only stamping one of these at this point, but this is a perfect project to do if you want to get rid of a bunch of scratch paper or scrap paper, or mass produce. So I'm gonna do Sending You Sunshine. So let's get our stamps here. Sending you. Okay. So as you can see here, we're going to kind of bring this at a diagonal. So you want to make sure that your sentiment is kind of hugging the bottom corner here. We're just going to go in the middle. And then this will kind of tuck in here. Then we'll use the etching on the door of our Misty to make sure that that is straight. Make sure our card is tucked in the corner there. And I am stamping with oxides. It's not exactly what they're designed for, which is another reason that I'm using the Misty, so that I can go back a few times if I need to. So the oxides, as the name would suggest, oxidize. So you can see on our sample here, this is about 4 days ago is when I made this initially, and you can see it's actually oxidized like copper would in the light and the wet. You know, under the sun, it oxidizes like a metal would. So I'm gonna do one more just to make sure. I see a little bit of patchiness there. So I'm gonna do one more time. Close the door. Press it down really good. All right, so there is our stamp, and I'll set him aside. I'll clean that off later. Okay, so at this point our card or our pattern panel is dry. It's ready to go. So I cut some L frames from the Shore paper pad. You could use a whole piece of paper. I just did this to save paper so I can get 7 or 8 cards out of one piece. So I'm going to use just a tape runner and just go down the side here. You could also put adhesive on the back if you wanted. So I'm going to choose which corner I like best. And I kind of like this corner. So I'm gonna do between 1/8 and 1/4 of an inch of a frame. Then I'll flip this over and do adhesive along the back. And you'll just place that. You want to make sure that you're not seeing, if you see white, then you've gone too far in. You want to make sure that you don't see white, because we're going to turn this over and cut off the overlap, but we do want to make sure that this covers the whole panel. So we'll do that and flip him over. So we're just going to cut this off. You could use a paper trimmer for this. I find it easier just to use scissors and then the edge of my card as a guide. There's our card. So now we're going to use using the little flip-flops here. So you have 2 bases of your flip-flops and 2 of the little dong pieces. I don't know what the proper terminology is for those. And they do cut a left and a right. So there is a corresponding piece for each of these. So I'm going to go ahead and put these together. These are little boogers, so you want to be careful when you're die cutting these that you don't lose any. And I'm just going to use a two-way glue. And again, I'm gonna protect my work surface. So you'll see one side is longer than the other. So that indicates that the side that's longer is the side of foot that it goes on. So like this one, the right side is longer, so it goes on the right foot. Okay, we've got our little flip floppies there. And I am going to use some foam dots. You could also, if you wanted, actually die cut the flip-flops out of fun foam, and that would give you the perfect size of like pop dot. I'm just going to use foam dots for simplicity's sake. So I'll do one on that one. One here. Oop, a little center there. Okay. So we're just gonna add our little flip-flops here at kind of the lowest point, just to kind of anchor that pattern panel into our little frame. And that is the card done. So this is a really easy card. It'd be very easy to reproduce and kind of mass produce. So for this one, I used the Distress Oxide ink. For this initial sample, we just used Versamark. So it gives you a little bit of a different effect, and you can kind of choose your color, choose your pattern paper, and you're off to the races. So I will say, you can see here, so again, this sample is one that we made last week. This one is one that I just stamped. You can see the difference in the ink. So when you're matching your pattern paper or your whatever border you want to use with the ink, if you're using oxides, you want to make sure that you give it time to kind of settle and set. But that is our sample. So thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.